Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to check out the contents of this box, which contains the new Rock 3A single board computer along with various accessories. The Rock 3A is a Raspberry Pi 4 competitor with a slot for an eMMC flash module as well as two M.2 slots. So let's go and take a closer look. Right, here we've got my package of Rock Pi goodies that I ordered from AllNet a few weeks ago. And Stanley the knife's already been in and cut through the tape down here because I needed to check this was the right AllNet box. I was getting somewhat confused. But if we open it up, you'll see I've not unpacked all the things yet. And indeed, I can't quite remember everything I've ordered. There's quite a few things in here. I've got various bits and pieces. Let's first of all open this up. I think I can see what this is, but we'll have a look. This is, oh yes, lots of pieces. This is an M.2 to PCIe slot converter, which might be useful in what we're doing here with the Rock Pi, but I might use that in other projects as well, just so I get one of those whilst it was a possibility. Here we have in here another M.2 device. This is, I'm fairly certain, a Wi-Fi module because we've got two M.2 slots on the Rock Pi 3A, one of which is for communications. Yes, this is, I'm certain, is a Wi-Fi module, Bluetooth module, which we can use in an M.2 slot. That was from the thing we just opened. This is a heatsink, fairly obviously. This is obviously the Rock Pi 3A, or Rock Pi 3 Model A. Let's just open that up as well. Bring in, what should we use? Stanley the knife on the cellophane, I think, just to get this opened up. Can we get in? Hopefully we can. Yes, I can get this off. Oh, it's exciting, isn't it? A new single board computer and in a little plastic box inside here. We open it up. There we are. Here is the Rock Pi 3A in a little bag. No need for Mr. Scissors to get in here. There we are, our new single board computer. We'll have a look at that in a second, but also in the box we've got down here an eMMC flash module. We've got here a little package containing, I think, oh yes, this is an M.2 extender board. We'll look at that later. And in here we've got interestingly, an instruction leaflet about the Rock Pi 4, which is an entirely different board. And this gets us back to the Rock 3A. And the next thing I think we should do is to put this down next to a couple of other single board computers. And so over here I've got a Raspberry Pi 4, and if we put the Rock 3A next to the Raspberry Pi 4, we can clearly see that they share a form factor. And the other board I want to compare the Rock 3A to is this one. This is the Rock Pi 4C. And I will freely admit I'm getting very confused here because the Rock 3A and not the Rock Pi 3A, as I think I've sometimes been calling it, the Rock 3A comes later than the Rock Pi 4 A, B or C. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the naming conventions here with these RADSA SBCs. Anyway, a more fundamental thing to point out is the difference in the SoC that's driving these boards, because if we look on the Rock Pi 4C or the A or the B that came before it, the SoC is under the board rather than on the top as on the Rock 3A, and on the Rock Pi 4 boards the SoC is an RK3399, which has got two 1.8 GHz A72 cores and four 1.4 GHz A53 cores. It is a hexacore processor. Whereas on the Rock 3A, we've actually got a quad-core processor, an RK3568, with four 2 GHz A55 cores. And if you're wondering, there is a Rock 3B, which, as far as I can tell at the moment, is not yet available. But it has an entirely different form factor, as we can see, with all of the connectors on one edge, two Ethernet sockets, and a SATA port. And I expect to be taking a look at this board in 2022. Anyway, for now, I'll go back to the Rock 3A. It is the video about this board after all. It's the wrong way round. There we are. And I think it's now time to take a closer look at this board's specification. The Rock 3A, which as we can see here is also branded as the Toy Brick, is available in 3 different models with either 2, 4 or 8 GB of low power DDR4 RAM. This particular board is an 8 GB model which cost me $75, whilst the 2 and 4 GB boards cost $55 and $35 respectively. So pricing is very similar to a Raspberry Pi 4. As I've already noted, the SoC is an RK3568 with 4 2 GHz A55 cores, and it also has an ARM Mali G52 GPU. Next to the SoC we find the low power DDR4 RAM, and also on top of the board we have a display connector, a DSI connector, and a camera connector, a CSI connector. And then we also have this M.2 slot, which is an E-keyed slot into which we can fit a wireless module. And Radsa sell M.2 wireless modules called the A1, the A2 and the A3, and these are priced between $5 and $15. And if you're wondering, the module I purchased is the A2, the $10 one, and this gives us 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5.0. So let's fit it to the board. There we are, we've now got wireless connectivity, and if you're wondering, this screw was in the packet, I almost missed it in the unboxing, and I also missed the antenna, which I'll clip on at my heart's content when I'm not working on camera. If we now turn to the main front edge, we find a USB-C socket to power the board, and then a full-size HDMI 2.0 socket that offers 4K output at up to 60 frames a second. There's then a gold-plated 3.5mm audio jack that notably includes a microphone input as well as stereo output, and provides access to a 24-bit 96 kHz analog audio codec. Spinning 90 to the first short edge, we find a gigabit Ethernet port, and then 2 Type A USB 3 ports and 2 Type A USB 2 ports. Then on the second long edge, there's a color-coded and Raspberry Pi compatible 40-pin GPIO connector, and finally on the second short edge we discover 2 indicator LEDs, a power button, as well as a 3-pin header that I presume is for power and recovery buttons as well. But we're not finished yet, because if we take the board and turn it over, there's lots of exciting things on the underside of the Rock 3A. For a start, we've got our second M.2 slot. This is an M-keyed slot, and it supports an NVMe SSD up to 8 TB in capacity. However, as on other Rock Pi boards, the connector points outwards. To show you what I mean by that, we'll bring in an NVMe SSD, which would have to plug in like that, which is not terribly convenient and means we need some kind of mounting solution, which we'll look at later in the video. Next to the M.2 slot, we've also got a TF card slot, which will take a microSD card up to 128 GB in size. We can boot from that. And we've also got here the connectors for an eMMC flash module, also up to 128 GB in size, and we can boot from that as well. And then finally, on the opposite side of the underside of the board, if you see what I mean, we've got an OTG switch here and a connector for a real-time clock battery. And so there we are. This is the Rock 3A, a very well specified and reasonably priced single board computer. Right, I've now fitted the heatsink and Wi-Fi antenna, as you can see, and if we take a look underneath, I've also clipped on the eMMC flash module. This is 16 GB in capacity, and earlier I very carefully connected it to an eMMC to microSD card adapter that I'd previously purchased. In turn, this allowed me to plug the module into my laptop so I could image Debian to it using Balena Etcher as if the eMMC module were a microSD card. So, if we now turn the board back over, we're all ready to connect it up to the usual peripherals and to turn on the power. And here we go, we've got a green LED, and fairly soon we'll get hopefully, yes, the blue flashing LED. And if we go across to the monitor output, you'll see that very rapidly we arrive at the Debian login requester. And I'll just point out there's no fast motion was applied there. This really is how rapidly we boot up into Debian from the eMMC module on the Rock 3A. So I just need to put in the username and password. I haven't changed the defaults yet, which are rock and rock. I would have used paper and scissors, but never mind, we'll use rock and rock because they're the ones that currently work. And here we are on the Debian desktop. And as usual in my videos, this is not my first boot. I have booted already and made a few changes to scaling so things read better on video. But basically you're seeing what you get if you install the official Debian image on the Rock 3A. This is what you get straight out of the box. If we go up to the menu, you'll see in applications there's not a lot pre-installed. We've got a reasonable number of settings. You can configure things very nicely here, as I have, I think, to my own judgment anyway. And after that, we've got a few accessories. We've got an image viewer under graphics, a couple of web browsers, Chromium and Firefox. We've got XFburn under multimedia, that is it. And under Office, we've got a dictionary. I haven't even installed the Abbey word processor, let alone LibreOffice. So this is very much a Debian image prepared so you can install all your own software. Under System, though, we do have 8-top, so we'll run up 8-top so we can take a look under the hood. There we are. Can I draw out the corner there? A little bit fiddly to draw out corners with the settings here. Must try and alter that. But anyway, the main thing we see here is how little memory we're using. We've only got 280 megabytes being used right now with this graphical distro running. I think that's very impressive. Out of our 8 gigabytes, under 300 meg used, 280 meg. This is a very resource efficient distro. Anyway, I'll stop being excited about that and we'll go down to the launcher down here. Let's launch the browser from down there. And hopefully, if I've got things set up correctly, it'll take us to the wiki for the Rock 3. And by jingo, it has. And here we've got some reasonable documentation from RADSA. It includes a downloads page, which is where, of course, I got my image from. There we are. You'll see we've got here a Debian desktop and also a server image of Ubuntu, a non-desktop version of Ubuntu there if you want to use that. And there are a few third-party images as well becoming available, including Armbian. And it's worth pointing out that for the official images, there are install wikis, and they're quite important. I did have to do a bit of messing around here to get everything working properly, particularly with Wi-Fi, because as you might have noticed, we have no icon here for Wi-Fi on the panel. We've got one for Bluetooth. We can go down there and pick up the Bluetooth adapters and things and see things, no problems at all. But there's nothing for Wi-Fi. There's nothing to turn Wi-Fi on and off, let alone to select your network and actually log into it. And this is a bit strange, I think, given that here I've purchased an M.2 Wi-Fi module intended for use for the Rock 3A. And yet in the desktop image they make available for the board, there's nothing graphically to work with Wi-Fi. What you have to do is go down here under Wi-Fi, you probably guessed that bit, and you'll see under Wi-Fi connection it tells you how to install things, how to connect to Wi-Fi, how to connect to your network, which I have to report isn't entirely persistent. Sometimes it keeps your connection next time you log in, sometimes it doesn't. And I think in 2021, nearly 2022, this is really not ideal. Other than this, as you saw previously, it's a fairly nippy distro. It boots up very rapidly. It does have some stability issues, particularly with the browsers installed here. Firefox crashes quite a lot, Chromium a little bit less. And I'm sure some of you want to see how well it handles online video streaming media. So we'll look at my standard YouTube playback test, which I will tell you in advance will not work terribly well. I don't think there's hardware accelerated playback here. In fact, I'm pretty certain there isn't. But let's just try and get it running. You can see already it's not going to be the fastest thing in the world. But there we are. It's trying to play an advert. Let's take it full screen and skip past the advert. Here we are. And if we now try and get to the settings, it's on 360p at the moment. I'll try 1080p. I think you know what's going to happen. And I'll try to bring up Stats for Nerds down there like that. And it does all right apart from the bits it doesn't. There we are. The internet speed also seems to be very low here, which is weird because my internet speed is about 50 megabits and it's not showing that at the moment. Anyway, it got there eventually and it's playing. It's not playing perfectly. There are clearly drop frames. This is not the thing I think you'd purchase this board for. But anyway, I thought I'd show you YouTube playback because if I didn't, you'd ask anyway. But I think we'll now move on to test out an NVMe SSD. Greetings! Here I am back again, and I've now added this WD Black NVMe SSD to the Rock 3A using the mounting kit we unboxed earlier. And this is the same type of mounting kit I've used previously on a Rock Pi 4B and a Rock Pi 4C, and indeed it's really designed to work with one of those boards. If we just bring that in, you might remember these boards, the Rock Pi 4 A, B and C, can have a big heatsink mounted on the base, and the mounting kit for the NVMe drive fits in with that. That's how the thing is designed. But it still works pretty well here on the Rock 3A, and so if we get the board all connected up and running, we can go across to our Debian desktop. And here, if we access a terminal and I type the command lsblk or list block devices, it should list all the devices on the system. And sadly, when we do that, we find that the only device on this system is the eMMC flash module up here, eMMC BLK0. We don't find our NVMe SSD. And I've been trying to get this to work for quite a lot of hours now, a very large lot of hours today and yesterday. I've tried doing various system updates. I've tried using a different power supply because I read in a forum the power supply can be a problem. I am using the official Rock power supply, but I've tried 3 others. They don't work either. And I did get to the point of almost giving up and saying I can't get the NVMe SSD working on the Rock 3A. But I then suddenly had a thought, which was, what about trying Ubuntu server? So I've installed that terminal interface distro on a micro SD card, and if we use the magic of filmmaking, we can go across to Ubuntu server. And here we are on its command line, where if I execute an lsblk, lo and behold, the NVMe drive appears as NVMe 0N1 with a single partition called NVMe 0N1P1. And also here we can see the eMMC modules we could back in Debian, listed as eMMC BLK0 with its partitions. And we can also see the 32GB microSD card that I've installed Ubuntu server on, listed as eMMC BLK1. In this distro, I've also installed HD parameters, so if we find the right syntax in the buffer, we can run a speed test on the NVMe drive. And clearly it can't read the identity information from the drive, but all we want is the speed, which is 1033.97, effectively 1034 megabytes a second. And whilst the WD Black SSD we're testing I know can deliver a read speed of well over 3400 megabytes a second, this is, as far as I can recall, the fastest drive speed I've ever measured on an ARM SBC. And whilst we're here, I'm sure you want to know the speed of the other drives. So let's start with the eMMC module. There we go. And I'll scroll up a bit on this zoomed in display. And we get a read speed of about 125 megabytes a second for the eMMC flash module. Finally, we'll test the microSD card interface. And here we are running from a SanDisk Ultra card. But the final reported speed over the Rock 3A TF interface is only 56 megabytes a second, which is a little disappointing. However, as I've just noted, over 1 gigabyte a second for the NVMe SSD is fantastic on ARM SBC and opens up all kinds of possibilities, at least here in Ubuntu server. At $35 for the 2GB model, or $40+ if you choose to add an M.2 wireless card, the Rock 3A is a very good value single board computer. You get a lot of hardware for your money. Now clearly, at the current time, software support needs to improve. How often have I said that about a new single board computer? But I am prepared to cut the Rock 3A some slack because the hardware is very good. The 2 M.2 slots open up all kinds of future possibilities. So I'm going to watch the board and its community support and how it grows with great interest. And I'm also looking forward very much to taking a look at the Rock 3B with its different form factor. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.